Settle in. Let your body grow still. Let your breathing slow. The modern world, with all its humming lights and digital distractions, begins to fade. Tonight we are stepping back. Back to a time not too long ago, yet so far removed from comfort. A time of coal and cobblestones, corsets and soot alleyways thick with fog and lives lived in shadow. Imagine yourself in Victorian London. The year is 1851. The city is the largest in the world's welling, bursting, wheezing under the weight of its people. The sky is gray with coal smoke. The streets are slick with mud waste and the endless trudge of feet. But we are not here for palaces or parlors. Not yet. We begin far below the surface glitter of empire. We begin where the chimney smoke settles. We begin in the slums. Imagine you wake up, if you can call it that. You've barely slept. You're lying on a straw-stuffed mattress, thin as parchment, in a narrow room shared with 6, maybe 7 others. Some are your siblings. One may be a stranger. The walls sweat with damp. The ceiling drips in the rain. The air smells of boiled cabbage and mildew. Worse. There's a bucket in the corner. It's already full. No, you won't empty it. There's nowhere to take it. This is not unusual. It's not tragic. This is typical. You are in a common lodging house, slum boarding house where the poorest Londoners scrape together pennies for a shared corner of the floor. Or if you're lucky, a rope stretched across a room to sleep slumped forward on. They call it the hangover. Outside, the streets are already alive, not with songbirds or the cheerful sounds of morning, but with shouting, coughing, footsteps, and the occasional clatter of a horse-drawn cart. The air is cold, wet, and acrid, with the scent of burning coal. There is no breakfast waiting for you. If you're a child and, you likely may be sent to a match factory, or to work as a mudlark, wading through the banks of the Thames, looking for scraps of coal, nails, or bones. The water is black, the mud is worse, your feet sting, you don't speak. You just wade. Others sweep chimneys, some sell flowers on corners. Still others thread their way through textile factories, fingers raw, coughing from the endless dust that hangs in the air like a second skin. If you're lucky, you work indoors. If you're luckier, you don't work yet. In Whitechapel, in Lambeth, in the warren of tenements that chokes the East End, disease is a constant whisper. Cholera, typhus, scarlet fever, and the ever-looming shadow of tuberculosis move silently through these streets. And when death comes, it is quiet. A neighbor stops appearing. A child's cough ceases. The body disappears before anyone misses it. Or no doctors, not really. And if there are, they won't come here. The local workhouse infirmary, perhaps. But that, too, is a kind of death. Imagine the rhythm of your day. Up before the light, walking to a mill under blackened skies, shoulder to shoulder with other suit-covered bodies. The machines clatter and shriek. You cannot hear yourself think. You cannot stop. The overseer watches. Lunch, if there is one, is a crust of bread or a potato from home. Dinner may be porridge. Water is taken from a shared pump if it isn't tainted. Back at the lodging house, someone has taken your spot. You don't argue. You curl in a corner. You listen to the coughing of the old man 2 feet away. You hear the rattle in his chest. And then you sleep for a few hours until it starts again. And yet even in these soot-black alleys and crumbling rooms, life continued. Stories unfolded, shadows moved. Some of those shadows carried secrets. Now let us walk, slowly, into one such story. A quiet figure in the fog. A mother, a wife, a poisoner. Shall we continue? England's first serial killer and the quiet horror of Victorian respectability. Now imagine you are someone else entirely. You live not in London, but in the northeast of England in County Durham. The year is 1872. The towns here are different than the slums of Whitechapel. They are coal towns, quiet, gray, cold. Rows of narrow brick houses, the smell of ironworks and dust lingering in the air. A working-class world built on mining, factory labor, and thrift. And within this world, a woman walks to the grocer's. Her bonnet is modest, her face pale but composed. Her name is Mary Ann Cotton. To her neighbors, she is unremarkable. A mother, a wife, sometimes grieving, sometimes newly remarried. People whisper about her misfortunes, but such misfortunes are common. Death is no stranger in these parts. Yet behind her calm face, history was quietly turning black. Mary Ann Cotton was born in 1832. Her early life was ordinary. She married young. She bore children. She moved with her husbands, plural, as one died, then another, and then another still. A woman losing children was not suspicious. A woman losing husbands, one after another, was seen as tragic, but not unnatural. After all, disease took so many, and in a world without modern medicine, without autopsies or forensics, or even centralized record-keeping, there were few patterns to notice. But there were patterns. In time, questions began to form. A child dies, then a husband, then a mother-in-law, then another child, then another. Mary Ann moves, remarries, the pattern repeats, always quiet, always in the background. And always shortly, before or after, Mary Ann had taken out a small life insurance policy. By the time suspicions caught up with her, at least 21 deaths had followed her footsteps. Sons, daughters, lovers, friends. She didn't kill with violence. There were no screams, no knives, nothing sensational. She killed with arsenic, odorless, tasteless, and in small enough doses, slow and mistaken for a common illness. It mimicked the symptoms of cholera and gastroenteritis, vomiting, cramps, exhaustion, the kind of death that didn't raise eyebrows in a town where children starved and miners coughed blood. And that's what made her so terrifying. She didn't live in the shadows. She was the woman next door, the woman offering tea, the woman in mourning, quiet, unassuming, grieving, until the final husband, a man named Frederick Cotton, fell ill. Oh, and with him her stepson. But by now, patterns were emerging. A local doctor, puzzled by the boy's symptoms, took note. Authorities were informed. An autopsy was performed unusual at the time. Arsenic was found in the child's body, not a trace, not a theory, proof. She was arrested, calmly as always. And when questioned, she reportedly said, with chilling detachment, "I won't be troubled long. They'll hang me." And they did. In 1873, Mary Ann Cotton was hanged at Durham Jail. The execution was botched. The drop was too short. She slowly strangled, gasping, twisting for several minutes. It was a rare moment of drama in a life that had unfolded in whispers. But this is not just the story of a killer. It is a story about Victorian fear, about a world terrified not of monsters in the night, but of silence in the home, of polite evil, of women with too many funerals, and of arsenic, the quiet killer found in household soap, rat poison, and even cosmetics. Mary Ann Cotton became a kind of myth, a warning. But she was also a reflection of the era, an era where grief was common, where death did not raise questions, where insurance came cheap, and women had few options. She turned those rules into weapons, and the world, when it finally noticed, could only hang her and whisper. The fog of fear didn't lift. In London, where soot clung to every surface and alleys twisted like a maze, another shadow was stirring. But this time, the bodies were not poisoned. They were torn, and the whispers would become a roar. Let us now walk into Whitechapel, quietly, carefully, into the mystery that has never been solved. A gentle descent into the mystery, the routine, and the fog of Whitechapel. Imagine yourself again in Whitechapel. But now, it is autumn of 1888. The city feels the same, great, wet, crowded, but the atmosphere has changed. It is no longer just the smell of coal smoke and sewage that fills the air. It is the weight of fear. Fear that walks behind you, fear that watches from windows, fear that reads headlines by candlelight. By now, the name Jack the Ripper is whispered in every public house. Children speak it in alleys. Vendors mention it under their breath. The police, though overwhelmed and uncertain, walk their beats with sharpened nerves. But this is not a story of horror, not in the way you think. This is a story of a woman. Not a headline, not a body, a person. Her name was Mary Jane Kelly, and she was the last of the canonical five. She lived in a small room at 13 Miller's Court, off Dorset Street, one of the most notorious streets in East London. But in many ways, her life was much like so many others around her. Mary Jane was believed to be in her mid-20s. Irish by birth, Her past is cloudy, filled with fragments and guesses. She had lived in Cardiff for a time, then possibly in Paris, and eventually found her way to London. She lived, like many others, by her wits, by her voice, and by offering company to those who paid. She was said to be cheerful, warm. She sang in the evenings often the Irish ballad, "A Violet from Mother's Grave." Neighbors remembered her as gentle, even playful. She shared her food when she had any. She borrowed candles, sometimes shoes. She called her room my little place. It was hardly more than a single space, a small fireplace, a bed, a window partly covered by a rag. The wallpaper peeled. The walls were thin. On the night of November 8th, she was seen around midnight. She was with a man, no one knows who. She had been drinking, perhaps lightly. Some say she sang, some say she laughed, and then nothing. By morning, the room was silent. But this is not a tale of violence. That part is well known and unsuitable for dreams. Instead, let us remain in the hallway. Let us listen only to what the neighbors heard. Nothing. Silence unusual in such places. A room that, for once, didn't echo with singing or murmurs or laughter. That absence was its own kind of alarm. Later, when authorities forced open the door, the final, horrific chapter in the Ripper saga would begin. But for now, we stay in the quiet. We linger with her memory. Mary Jane Kelly was more than a victim. She was a resident of East London. She was one of thousands of women who lived in lodging houses, who worked long days for pennies, who tried to keep warm, who sang to themselves as they folded clothes or lit fires. The world around her was crumbling. The police were desperate, the newspapers were breathless, and yet Mary Jane moved through it with something soft, something human. Her story is remembered not because of how it ended, but because of how vividly she once lived. She had a bedspread with a rose pattern. She wore a red shawl. She spoke of dreams. She had hoped to leave London. Perhaps we all do. As the story of the Ripper faded into legend, London continued. Its poor still suffered. Its rich still dined. The fog still crept in each night, curling around iron railings and gas lamps like memory itself. But far from the soot and slums, another world existed, a world behind thick curtains and gilded parlors. Let us move now to the other side of the city, to the drawing rooms of the elite. Tea, etiquette, and the quiet weight of appearances. Now imagine, just for a while, that you are far from the slums. No more damp alleys, no clatter of carts, no soot in your throat. Instead, your morning begins in a country estate, perhaps in Surrey, or Hampshire, or the more fashionable outskirts of Richmond. Your bed is canopied. The linen is fine, starched, and cool against the skin. Outside, the sun is beginning to filter through heavy brocade curtains. You do not dress yourself. That task belongs to your lady's maid or valet, who enters quietly, carrying a basin of warm water, freshly poured, and a small silver tray with your morning tea week, lightly steeped with milk. Perhaps a single soft biscuit. There is no rush. The Victorian aristocrat's morning begins slowly. Dressing takes time. Layers upon layers, chemise, corset, petticoats, overskirts or trousers, shirt, waistcoat, cravat. The clothing is not merely fabric, it is a symbol. Each item communicates your rank, your wealth, and your restraint. After dressing, you descend the grand staircase. Your footsteps echo softly in the marble hall. The household staff have already been awake for hours. Fires lit, silver polished, breakfast prepared. Your breakfast is not hurried. It may be a small affair, soft-boiled eggs, toast, kippers, perhaps a bit of fruit. Or it may be more elaborate, deviled kidneys, cold ham, and multiple courses. It depends on the house and on your guests. If you are a gentleman, you might retreat to the study, to read the Times, to smoke, or to manage correspondence. If you are a lady, your time may be spent overseeing the household accounts, practicing the piano, or engaging in needlework. Much of your day is structured around appearances. Visitors may arrive mid-morning, neighbors, or relations greeted with careful civility. Conversations are calm, measured, and often veiled with politeness that both conceals and reveals. Everyone knows the rules. No one says quite what they mean. Afternoons are for calling or for drives. Carriage takes you through town or along the winding lanes of your estate. The horses are groomed. The coachman is silent. You wave just once, just enough. Then, perhaps tea. The great ritual of Victorian life is taken between 4 and 5 o'clock, often in the drawing room. A low table set with fine china, scones, seed cake, and finger sandwiches, cucumber, egg, and cress, ham with mustard. The tea is poured with care. Milk, then tea or tea, then milk, depending on your household tradition. Conversations remain light. Serious matters are rarely discussed. The goal is balance, grace, and control. Evenings are formal. If guests are present, dinner is a grand affair. You may change into evening dress, ladies into gowns of silk or satin, men into black tailcoats and white gloves. A butler announces each course. The meal may last hours, from oysters and to game and pudding, each served under flickering candlelight. Conversation becomes more layered. One speaks of politics, art, the season in London, but always with restraint. Loudness is frowned upon. Emotion is carefully wrapped. After dinner, music, cards, perhaps a quiet walk on the terrace, if weather permits. Then, one by one, guests retire to their chambers. The halls fall silent. Your bed is turned down for you. A warming pan has been passed between the sheets. A final cup of tea may be left at your bedside. You undress again with help. When the room is dark, when the fire crackles low and the shutters are drawn tight, you lie in silence. But even here, in this world of luxury, comfort is not guaranteed. You are bound by rules, by expectation, by lineage and legacy, and the pressure to marry well, to behave correctly, to never ever step outside the lines. In the slums, survival was physical. Here, survival is social. A misstep means exile not in geography, but in reputation. A scandal, a rumor, a whispered breach of conduct, and the doors of society may quietly close forever. And so, from Whitechapel to the West End, from the boarding house to the drawing room, life in Victorian England moved forward, measured, layered, and often crushing in its own way. But now, the streets fall quiet. The coal fires burn low, the factories sleep, and so can you. All that remains is to bring our journey to a close. And now, the lamps grow dim. The streets of Victorian London, so crowded, so loud, so heavy with smoke and sorrow, begin to still. Imagine it, a blanket of quiet settling over the rooftops. The last hansom cab clatters away into the night. The final coal fire fades to a dull red glow. Even the fog begins to drift, slow and heavy, through the alleys and over the cobblestones, until there is nothing but stillness. We've traveled together through the cramped, wheezing spaces of the slums, where sleep came out of exhaustion more than peace. We've walked beside Mary Ann Cotton, calm and composed, her footsteps muffled by death itself. We wandered through the fog with Mary Jane Kelly, listening for a song that never came. And finally, we crossed into the polished hush of aristocratic life, where silence had its own weight, its own expectations. Each of these lives, so different in setting, in struggle, in station, was shaped by the same great city. A city at the height of its empire. A city bursting with invention, ambition, and inequality. And now that city sleeps. So should you. Because here, in this quiet moment, in the space between history and dreams, you can leave it all behind. Factories, the fear, the etiquette, the endless soot. They belong to the past. Your bed is warm, your room is quiet, the air is clean. And the morning, when it comes, will not bring coal smoke or hunger. Only light, only rest, only peace. Good night.